Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 7:30 in the morning here, Calgary, Alberta, Monday, August the 9th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room is open, and I already have a good friend in there, and that's my friend John. And yeah, I'm glad to be here, glad to be able to do the shows. Anybody who's used to listening to the archives might be able to catch the live show because I'm working later this week, so I'm able to, I just moved my shows up so I could sleep in a little bit later. I usually have to do my shows at 6 o'clock in the morning, but I'm working a little bit later this week, so I get to push my shows up to a more decent time, and which is kind of nice for me. It gives me a chance to sleep in a little bit. But yeah, glad to be able to continue on. Last week we were looking at codependency and the issues that kind of surround codependency. I didn't know a whole lot about codependency. I thought I did, just from, over the years had heard about codependency, and I thought maybe, certain people that I knew, even in my own family, were codependent, but I didn't know exactly what it was all about. So I'm glad to be able to look at this information, and it's helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for other people, especially survivors of child abuse, or people who have who live with alcoholics or substance abuse users, people who use illegal drugs and whatnot, or prescription drugs. It's something that can happen, within families. It can happen within relationships of any kind, really, and it's quite interesting to take a look at it. So, yeah, hopefully you'll get something out of this. I'm not a counselor or a therapist. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or anything like that. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows because I just want to be one more voice out there, and I believe that, all we ever really hear about child abuse is the headlines. We hear the headlines, we see the headlines in the paper, on the news, on the internet regarding children who have been killed and murdered at the hands of their parents or caregivers or child sexual predators, and or they're in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries, right? And we never hear anything else. We don't hear anything about preventing child abuse. We don't hear anything about survivors of child abuse. There's not a whole lot of people talking about the issues. In the mainstream media, except for there's a handful of people here on Blog Talk Radio who are talking about it, and I'm sure there's other people as well elsewhere around the world, really, in North America, and but it's just not talked about enough, as far as I'm concerned. There's so many survivors. One of the stats going around is that in North America, just in I think it's the United States alone, there's 60 million survivors of child abuse living right now. And I mean, that is ridiculous. Like, when we think about that, but we know the stats, in North America, 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be abused sexually under the age of 18, whether it's unwanted sexual touching or rape or sexual assault. So this is the whole issue. It's an epidemic. It's a crisis, and unless we start looking at it as a crisis and as an epidemic, it's not going to change, right? We have to look at this thing as in the seriousness that it is. It's a serious, huge problem. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys, and that's the stats pretty much for whether it's physical abuse, verbal abuse, psychological, sexual, you name it, emotional, all forms of abuse, right? Pretty much the stats across the board are 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys. So those are not good numbers, and we want to see those numbers going down, right? So I just want to be one more voice. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm studying all the time, and I just feel like it's very helpful for me to read this information, and I feel like hopefully it will help somebody else out as well. And if you're under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, because the topics of abuse are scary, and since they're not talked about all that often, within the homes or at schools, different places like that, you might not have heard a whole lot about abuse and what happens to people when they are and have experienced abuse, right? Adult survivors of abuse. So I just ask that young people have someone listen to the show with you, and that way you can have, they can okay it, whether you should be listening to it or not, or they can help you if you have questions, right? So we're going to get right into this article. It's from www.saa-partners_SA/codependency.htm. And we were looking at Friday morning, we left off at this section that was sort of detailing denial patterns, low self-esteem patterns. We went through that, and compliance patterns. And way at the top of the actual article, they were saying, just what is codependent behavior? And they said, what is codependency? Codependent personality disorder this is what they're listing here, is a dysfunctional relationship with the self, characterized by living through or for another, attempts to control others, blaming others, a sense of victimization, attempts to fix others, and intense anxiety around intimacy. It says it is very common in people raised in dysfunctional families and in the partners and the children of alcoholics and addicts. So that's why I'm interested in this, because I was raised in a very dysfunctional family, and my family's still very dysfunctional. So, 40-odd years later after being born, my family, nothing's changed, except for most of my family's dead or passed away or whatever. But there's only a few of us left, but we're all still very much dysfunctional. And so it says codependency is a disorder that usually has its roots in deep feelings of shame that arise from child abuse. And they said shame is the feeling that you are not good enough, not deserving, inherently worthless than other people, bad, etc. Many people who were shamed in their histories spend much of their lives feeling themselves in such a one-down position to others, like lesser than, not worth it, not deserving, right? Other people go the other way. It says other people compensate and flip over into feeling arrogant and superior, being needless, denying that they have emotional problems or emotions at all, and assuming a one-up position with others, like they're better than, they're more superior, they don't have problems, they don't have these needs that other people have, right? They're fine. So it can go either way. And it says in either case, both adjustments in adult life reflect deep toxic shame and are the product of abuse. Both adjustments are dysfunctional. So I think that's so interesting, because even within my own family, some of my siblings took the one down position, the lower than, not deserving, less than, right, worthless. And other siblings of mine took the one up, feeling that they're better than, they don't have problems, denying that they have any kind of emotional problems. They feel like they're just better than the rest of the family. So our family very much split like that. Some went one way, some went the other. And I think it's very interesting to see that, and interesting to see they list here the symptoms of codependency: controlling behavior, distrust, perfectionism, avoidance of feelings, judging self, others without mercy. These are just a few of the things they list here. This website is just really quite good, I think. Low self-esteem, often projected onto others, like why don't they get their act together? Difficulty in developing or sustaining meaningful relationships. Feelings of being different, this is something that I relate to completely. Confusion and sense of inadequacy. Being either super responsible or super irresponsible, or alternating between these. And, I have problems with that as well. Almost all of this stuff I can see just in, kind of relate to. But I don't want to self-diagnose myself as being codependent. I would want a licensed, trained professional to make that decision for me. But it is interesting to see, what the actual behaviors are. And then we can kind of take a look at it. And, see just whether or not maybe we might be codependent, right? Key identifying behaviors, we went over that already. I'm just kind of going back through the article just to refresh us, It says, do you find yourself trying to control a partner, relative, friend, employer, or colleague's sexual actions or thoughts? This is someone who might have codependency within their own sexual attitudes, right? It says, do you use sex to try to repair relationships when they are strained? I know that there's lots of people that do this kind of stuff. Neglect your needs or those of family and friends to comply with your partner's sexual desires. These kind of things, right? These would be key identifiers. Then they have a test that people can take, a little tiny test here from Melody Beatty, author of Codependent No More. It's like a little checklist, and they say, do you feel responsible for other people, their feelings, thoughts, actions, choices, wants, needs, well-being, and destiny? Do you feel compelled to help people solve their problems or by trying to take care of their feelings? It's almost like putting other people before yourself, sort of thing. It says, do you lose interest in your own life when you are in love, right? It says, and here's a good question. I really like this question. Do you stay in relationships that don't work and tolerate abuse in order to keep people loving you? I think that is that's a sort of a question that I think anybody who's suffered abuse of any kind, whether it's domestic violence and abuse or child abuse, should take a look at that question. Do you stay in relationships that don't work and tolerate abuse in order to keep people loving you? that's a huge question for people who are survivors of abuse, because we quite often become re-victimized as adults, because we end up in these relationships where we tolerate abuse because we think, he or she will change. They love me. They don't mean to hurt me. And all the while taking more abuse after being abused as children, right? And it's just I think it's so important for people to, if you've been abused as a child, make sure that your relationships with people in your adult life are solid and they're based on truth and, goodness, and don't allow yourself to be abused again. I talk a lot about my mom's situation because my mom was abused as a child by my grandmother, and then married a man who was very abusive, and it was a loveless marriage. My mom, there was nothing in it for her, except for really a lot of sorrow and heartache and pain and misery. He was very abusive, and so she left her mother, who was abusing her, to marry a man who would turn out to be her abuser as well, and she had a horrible life. I mean, I'm just giving you guys this information firsthand because I hated to see what happened to my mom. I loved my mom very much, and it was very heartbreaking to see her struggle, her struggle with her own abuse and her own past, and then ending up in this marriage that was loveless and completely horrible. And she stayed in it. She stayed in it because I don't know why she stayed in it. We've all asked ourselves that question, all the siblings that are alive and, could ask that question. It's hard to say why she stayed in it. She must have, she towards the end, when I was 30 years old, she actually told me that she didn't want any of us, her children. We were all worthless to her. She did not want us. She wanted to be an artist, and she hated her life. And this was when I was 30 and left the country. I actually moved up to Canada because I couldn't take her toxic abuse anymore. But the thing is she told me the truth, finally, at the age of 30, that, she didn't want us in the first place. So when the CPS and DHS got involved, whichever one, where there was a report made when I was a toddler, my mom said that she was telling the courts, "Oh, don't take my children from me. I love my children, and they're all I have," and all this, right? And then so the court said, "Okay, well, if you and your husband, you have to go get counseling, or we'll remove the children from the home." And that was us, all of the 5 siblings that were still living at home. And my mom said, "Yeah, I begged and pleaded with the courts to let me keep you, trying to make us feel that she did a good thing, see." And then she abused us, right, especially myself. And then at the age of 30, to have her tell me that we didn't mean anything to her at all, and that she did not love us, she did not want us, she hated it. She hated her whole family and hated that life. It just broke my heart, because I thought, you made us go through all of that when you could have just let us go. You know what I mean? So I was very distraught and had to leave the country. I literally had to leave the whole country just to get away from them. But the thing is she was just so miserable, and so don't do that to yourself, you know what I mean? You don't want to end up on your 60 years old hating your life, hating yourself, and end up in another abusive situation with a partner or, a marriage or whatever. We have to be very careful about that, right? So then we left off here at denial patterns, low self-esteem patterns, compliance patterns, and whatnot. We talked about denial patterns and low self-esteem patterns and on Friday. And hopefully people can hear me. I know that my friend John Harrison, he's a poet, he's an author, he is an advocate, he's a survivor, and he has a website, www.b, the letter B, safe, S-A-F-E, the number 1, first, S-T, always.com. You want to go and check out his website, and hopefully, John, you can hear me now. He's in the chat room with me. It's so nice to have him here. And I'll just type a little note. I'm not sure if he can hear me now. So yeah, so this is the thing. We don't want to go on to enter into another abusive situation, whether it's a friendship. Even friends. I do not allow even friends to abuse me. I just absolutely refuse. I will not let anybody abuse me again, because I realized, what my mom had done in her life by allowing my dad to abuse her and mistreat her and staying in that marriage, right? She could have got out. She could have got help. And there was many times she could have got away from him. And, she didn't do it. And so I thought, I'm not going to live my life like that. No way. So I'm very, very particular about who I let in my life, and, I know people make mistakes. I make mistakes, I'm sure. I hurt people I don't mean to. And I know other people do things like that and they don't mean to. And, even with my own relationship with my sweetheart right now, we had a stormy first year and had to break it off. I had to go and do some healing and some real work. And we broke it off. We weren't even sure if we were going to get back together. And but a year later, I was ready to try again, and he was waiting for me. And so we gave it another try, and we've been together ever since. And it's just awesome, But we had to be very clear on our feelings. I told him, I said, I can't take any more abuse. If you're going to mistreat me in any way, there's the door, because I can't tolerate anymore. My heart is saturated. I can't take any more. So if you're going to do that, there's the door right now, And he did. I said the same for him too. I said, if I'm going to abuse you, there's the door for me, because we cannot mistreat each other. We need to be in this relationship because we want to be in it, because we love each other, we trust each other. It was serious, heavy-duty stuff, and we had to sit down and figure it out. And I'm glad that we did, because we're still together. We love each other very much, and we're best friends. And it's an amazing. But we were honest with each other. We were truthful with each other. We work stuff out when we have problems, and we don't take our abuse out on each other, right? And he grew up in a very loving home, so he had a hard time dealing with where I was coming from, because he couldn't understand why I was behaving the way I was, and I was just repeating my mother's actions, right? So very, very hard, absolutely hard, and I had to do a lot of work. I had a lot of work to do, and he did not put me down. He didn't make me feel lesser than. He didn't say, "Oh, you have these issues you need to work out." He was like, "Honey, we can do it together. You've been through a lot, and there's no reason why I can't help you, and you can't help me, and we can do this." He's a good man, and that's what I would wish for everybody. If in your relationship, your partner, that you would find somebody who would not mistreat you and who would be there for you, right? So important. Compliance patterns. This is where we left off, and I want to look at this because I don't know a whole lot about this. Here's the questions we're supposed to ask ourselves, right? Just to see if we actually have compliance patterns. I compromise my own values and integrity to avoid rejection or others' anger. That's something we can think about. I am very sensitive to how others are feeling and feel the same. I am extremely loyal, remaining in harmful situations too long. I value others' opinions and feelings more than my own, and am afraid to express differing opinions and feelings of my own. I put aside my own interests and hobbies in order to do what others want, and I accept sex when I want love. Now that's interesting, because I recognize that in one of my family members totally. Not myself, but one of my family members is totally like that. I compromise my own values and integrity to avoid rejection or others' anger. So that's interesting. See, I'm not like that at all. I don't compromise my own values and integrity. That's why I used to get, beaten and mistreated at home, because I would not say that what was happening within the home was okay. So then, of course, my mom would beat me, and anytime I complained about the situation, then I'd be in trouble with my dad, or because I was like, what, go ahead, do what you're going to do, but I'm going to say what I'm going to say, right? I am very sensitive to how others are feeling and feel the same. Now that's kind of interesting. I do some of that, right? Take on other people's feelings, and I know that I did have a bit of trouble with that. And I'm working on that, actually. So it's tricky. It's hard, right, to not take on somebody else's the way that they're feeling, their emotions, right? I do that at work, and I end up in trouble all the time doing that, because I'll take on my bosses. Like, if one of my bosses is having a hard day, I'll take on her mood. I'll take on her emotions. But that's because when I was living at home with my mom, in order to save myself from being mistreated, I quite often had to take on her mood or take on her side, right? Whatever was going on in my mom's life is what I would take on myself, and that way I could get into her head, so I could avoid being abused, right? So it was hard, right? I was steady doing that to try to save myself, right? And when I got older, I was doing it out of the goodness of my heart, because I really care about people, and so I would quite often take on what they're feeling, right? And that's something that's, it's hard to actually break that habit, right? It says, I am extremely loyal, remaining in harmful situations too long. That's something that, abused people who have suffered from abuse of any kind will quite often do because we're used to it. We're so loyal, but then again, we're used to being in harmful situations, so quite often we'll hang on to a relationship that we shouldn't be hanging on to just because, we think, oh, well, it's almost a norm for us, right? I mean, that can happen. I know I've seen someone in my family do this. This is where a family member of mine does this. I value others' opinions and feelings more than my own, and am afraid to express differing opinions and feelings of my own. That's not me, but that's one of my family members, totally. I put aside my own interests and hobbies in order to do what others want, and that's my other family member. These things I totally see I don't want to name names just in case this person listens to my show. I accept sex when I want love. That's my family member. So these don't necessarily apply to me. So I don't think I have too many compliance pattern problems. Control patterns, that's the next one they talk about. I believe most other people are incapable of taking care of themselves. I attempt to convince others of what they should think and how they truly feel. I become resentful when others will not let me help them. I freely offer others advice and directions without being asked. I lavish gifts and favors on those I care about. I use sex to gain approval and acceptance. I have to be needed in order to have a relationship with others. That's interesting. I think this whole control pattern thing, I believe most other people are incapable of taking care of themselves. I don't have a problem with that. I leave that up to other people. I'm sure other people are perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. Unless somebody comes to me and says, oh, I'm not managing well, or things are awfully hard for me right now. I just assume that they're taking care of themselves. You know what I mean? So I don't have a problem with that. I attempt to convince others of what they should think and how they truly feel. I always just tell people how I think and how I feel. I don't necessarily tell other people what they should be thinking or feeling. I don't know if I've ever done that in the past. I think sometimes when I'm trying to sway somebody in something, I do that, but I don't do that all the time. It's not like a problem sort of where I just do it all the time. I become resentful when others will not let me help them. That I don't have a problem with. It's like, if somebody wants help and they say they want a hand with something, and then they change their mind and then they say no, or whatever, I don't have a problem with that. But I guess there might be people that do. So I freely offer others advice and directions without being asked. I actually do a lot of that. It's because I always want to get my 2 cents in there, and I think thinking back on this, my oldest sister, who's passed away from cancer now, she was the oldest, I was the youngest. She told me that she never heard me speak until I was about 12 years old. So, she wasn't in the house when all the verbal, violent, crazy kind of emotional, physical abuse stuff was going on. She was already moved out when I was born. So she didn't see me, screaming at the top of my lungs at my parents and, yelling and telling people off because of the way they were treating me and other people. I was actually quite vocal, but I think when I was around, other people, I was kind of quiet. And then all of a sudden I started talking at the age of 12 and I never shut up. So, that's the problem. I do love to talk, and as people know, I've done like over 300 shows now. Talking is something I do enjoy doing. But I don't know, freely offer advice and directions without being asked. Sometimes I don't do that. I usually don't unless I feel like it's something that is really extra special that I just need to tell somebody because it's so good. It's such good advice or such good directions. I might say something. Otherwise, I try to back off, I lavish gifts and favors on those I care about. This I don't do. And I think it's because, sadly enough, I almost have to feel like a bit of a selfish person because I love people and, my friends and whatnot, but I don't lavish them with gifts and stuff, and maybe I should. Like they probably deserve it. I'm more self-centered, if I want something and I see it, I buy it for myself. I don't sit there and say, oh, I should buy this for so-and-so, or, well, I don't have a whole lot of friends. Maybe that's why, right? Maybe that's why I don't have a whole lot of friends, right? We have to ask ourselves these questions. Like when I go Christmas shopping, I tend to shop for myself, right? And this is really sad because every year I go Christmas shopping and I end up with a whole apartment full of stuff for myself, and then I have to go back out and buy stuff for everybody else, right? So this is the problem. I do tend to be a little bit, not on purpose, but a little bit selfish and self-centered. I think it's just from living on my own for so many years and not having to really be concerned about other people. I didn't get into the habit of these friendships, these relationships, right? Because I was on my own for quite a few years, away from people and away from this kind of thing, not making these relationships, right? So I don't quite fit into that. I use sex to gain approval and acceptance. This I don't have a problem with. I don't use sex for any reason, really. You know what I mean? I was sexually molested as a child, and so I have, those issues, right? And I do talk about that on my other blog talk shows. I have talked about it. I am an open book, so if people have questions, you're more than welcome to ask me. I believe truth is necessary, right? I had a lot of problems with my own sexuality growing up as a young girl, and even as a teenager, didn't want anybody to touch me. And because of the physical abuse that I had endured, I really didn't want anybody to touch me. And then the sexual abuse just made it, it reinforced it. And so I didn't like sex. I witnessed my dad rape my mother when I was 6 years old. People say, "Oh, how could it be rape? Are you sure it was rape?" It's like, when it's rape. I know it was rape, and that's too bad if other people just can't wrap their minds around that. But I was actually in the room, and my dad did not know it. I was sleeping on a couch, and I saw it. I witnessed it. It was very disturbing, and so I had a lot of problems with sexuality, my own sexuality. I just was very much non-sexual. I did not want anything to do with sex. But I had crushes on boys, and especially when I got older. I took on these, I had all these sort of high school guys that I had crushes on, and I thought they were good looking, and, but would I ever enter into any kind of a relationship with them? Absolutely not. And, anytime any guy would get close to me, I'd just push them away. And as far as relationship goes, they would be out of my life, quick, like now, because I could not handle being in a relationship. It took me until my 20s to get a grip on myself and realize that what had happened to me was not my fault, and that I wanted to experience these things. I wanted to be a woman. I wanted to experience having that intimacy and that closeness with someone, right? So it took me a long time, and so I did not have a problem with using sex to gain approval or acceptance. For me, it's still an uncomfortable thing for me. I don't really, I understand it, and it's good when it's good, but I'm not all, into this whole sexual thing, right? I'm very much comfortable not into the whole thing, right? So I still have issues to work out, and I know that, and that's one part of my life that I definitely would probably like to seek counseling for, seek some help for. So if I ever get any money and I get to go to counseling, I probably will talk to somebody about that, right? Here's the next question. I have to be needed in order to have a relationship with others. So so this question is like, if we're not needed, then we can't almost be in this relationship, right? If it's almost like, I must be needed, I must be wanted, there must be a reason for me to be there. I don't have that problem, but I can see why some people might, you know what I mean? Just taking on that role of being the one who can change things, who can fix things, who can help people, have to be needed, right? And I think my mom was very much like that. And she was always, saying, "Oh, you would just all die without me." And, all this stuff, right? She was always saying that we were not capable of doing anything. We were all useless, and we were all hopeless and worthless. And without her, it would have just been no good and all this, right? And she would never let us help, right? She would never let us help her. Like, the minute we tried to help her out, she'd be kicking us out of the house. Get out, you're in my way, sort of thing. And then she would complain that we weren't helping her, and then if we said anything, we'd get a beating. See, so all it would do was set up an abusive thing, right? She was able to say, "Oh, you darn kids aren't helping me," and of course then we'd be beaten. So, it was her way of being able to be needed, and then of course reinforce her abuse, right? So it was really quite damaging for us. But for her, she just lost out on a whole lot of good help, right? So we have about a minute left. We'll continue this tomorrow morning. We'll just keep looking at it. Thanks everybody for being here. I hope you have a great day and take care of yourselves. Just keep reaching out. That's all I can say for people. 3 years ago, I'm telling you, the difference between now and 3 years ago, it's like night and day. I mean, I just encourage people, if you're having a hard time, pick up a crisis line. If you don't have someone in your life to talk to, and you don't feel comfortable talking to me or a friend or anybody like that, call a crisis line. You know what I mean? Make sure that you do get some help, right? Don't suffer in silence. Don't suffer on your own, alone and in silence, right? We deserve to have a good life. We do count. We do matter. And, there's people out there who are trained professionals. And not only that, but you know what? They're probably survivors. Most of those crisis lines are manned by people who are survivors of abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, and they care. They're people like you and me, right? They just want to help. So make sure that you do reach out, and if you have to phone a crisis line, phone somebody. Don't suffer in silence, okay? Take good care of yourselves, and we'll be talking to you tonight. Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. I'll be on tonight with Elizabeth Brawley, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers, and my own show after that. So child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. So have a great day, everybody. I'll just keep you in my heart, and we'll be talking to you real soon, and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.